Sometimes I have an impression that maybe Baerbock and Scholz might be playing this game of bad cop and a good cop.
Mm-hmm.
Because clearly she represents this most hawkish part of German government, and this is clear. This is right now. It is visible when we observe German policy towards China. She's more outspoken, whereas Chancellery is more diplomatic, more pro-dialogue.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Furnival. You are watching or listening to an OSW interview. Today I'm talking to Lydia Guibadwa, an expert from OSW's German department. We'll be discussing Germany's Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock. Hi, Lydia.
Hello, Nick.
So, we're going to talk about Annalena Baerbock, the Foreign Minister of Germany. Could you start off by telling us what responsibilities, what powers the German Foreign Minister has?
So German Foreign Ministry is responsible for leading German policy in general. It also manages all German diplomatic representatives all around the world.
Mm-hmm. So the embassies, consulates.
Exactly. And also set the priorities for the German foreign policy. But one has to remember that it is the German Chancellor who set the guidelines of German politics, also in the German foreign policy. He has a final word when it comes to any disputes, any quarrels within the government, and whenever any controversies come up, he decides what's to do. And if we observe the development of German foreign policy after 1949, we can observe that Bundeskanzler expanded his powers when it comes to foreign policy, which was also visible in expanding his internal bureau, the number of experts dealing with foreign policy. So right now, there is this unwritten rule that when it comes to the most important directions of German foreign policy, it is the Chancellor who set the agenda, who set priorities, and, as I said before, has the final word.
Mm-hmm. And there is potential for conflict because the German government at the moment is a coalition and the Chancellor and the Foreign Minister are from different parties.
So this is a case for the most German governments, right? If you observe how the governments, previous German governments functioned, there was like an unwritten tradition, at least until recently, that the junior partner in the coalition takes the foreign office, and also the foreign minister is also vice-chancellor. Right now, it's not the case. The vice-chancellor is Robert Habeck, who is the Minister of Economy and Climate Protection. We can talk briefly why so later on, but until recently, in many previous governments, that was the case. That was the case. Naturally, it brings some disagreements, some internal quarrels. One have to fight for their spheres of influence. So one of the decisive factors when it comes to the sphere of influence of the foreign minister is how much competence he or she can carve from this great piece of cake that German political scene is.
So perhaps it's time to move on to the incumbent foreign minister. She is the first female foreign minister in German history and rather younger than typical. Is this something that's interesting in Germany, her age and her gender?
I would say so, because in Germany we clearly lack powerful women in high political positions.
Which is ironic after the Merkel age.
Yeah, although this is changing. Right now we have a debate in Germany about the parities in different spheres of life, also in politics. German political parties try to put women in higher positions within the party, and in a consequence, when it comes to putting people in the institutions on the high positions, In the consequence, women also take those positions. But there is, I would say that there is a problem, and right now it appears that Annalena Baerbock is, I think, the most important women in the German government, along with, for example, Minister of Development and economic help. But given the situation, the war in Ukraine, she's very much present in the media. She's also very outspoken. So she clearly puts her style in the politics forward. And it is quite distinctive when we compare it, for example, to Scholz.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to move on to the real political situation in a moment, but just if you could, before that, briefly explain where Ms. Baerbock came from, what's her political background, what her earlier career looked like, and how she became foreign minister.
So very briefly, Annalena Baerbock became known to the wider audience when she became Kanzlerkandidat, so the candidate for Chancellor of the Greens in the last parliamentary elections in Germany. At the beginning, she was very promising. The Greens in the polls were quite high, so there was a chance for them even to win and become the senior coalition partner. Nevertheless, during the campaign, Baerbock made a few, you could say, minor mistakes, such as there was accusations about plagiarism in her book, or presenting their curriculum vitae in a too beautiful and professional way. There were some inconsistencies between her curriculum vitae and the reality.
Mm-hmm.
And
many people have done that.
Oh yeah, but in the campaign, when everybody, especially chancellor candidates, are under such a close scrutiny, that may be problematic. And she also didn't gain supporters among the business circles. She had some controversial comments during the campaign, which also refrained big business from supporting the party. So in the end, as you all know, the Greens ended up as a third party in the election race, and became the coalition partner of the SPD along with FDP. But as the second partner with the biggest election results, they were allowed to nominate the Vice-Chancellor and take the Foreign Office. Because Baerbock was partly accused of the Greens results, although it was historically the high,
unexpectedly low.
Exactly. Although it was very high for the Greens, it wouldn't be well perceived by the Greens electorate if she had become the Vice Chancellor. So in the end, it was Robert Habeck, at that time the co-leader of the Greens, who became the Vice Chancellor and the Ministry of Economy and Climate Protection. So he took over a very important ministry within the German government, and she took over the foreign ministry. That's where the fun began. Nobody expected that only 2 months after finally constructing the government, the war in Russia would attack the Ukraine, and that completely, I think, in a quite significant way, it changed Baerbock's agenda. Definitely changed the German government agenda, but also her agenda and her idea of how she would like to lead the foreign ministry and what priorities she has for her tenure as a foreign minister.
Germany is famous for its long pacifism after the Second World War, and the Greens are quite strictly pacifist, in fact. But this changed dramatically sometime after February of 2022.
Absolutely.
But Did it change symmetrically? So were there any frictions between the Chancellery and the Foreign Ministry?
Yes, quite significant. And it was actually very interesting to see how Baerbock, the foreign minister coming from the Greens, as you mentioned, a party which was founded on the pacifist movement in Germany, was the proponent of sending weapons to Ukraine faster and more in a more efficient way. I think the debate over leopards, over sending leopards to Ukraine, was quite significant. It was not only her, it was also Habeck, who supported faster decision. And actually, maybe we should even go back to the election campaign, because from the very beginning, the Greens were quite outspoken when it came to Russia and China. They were described as hawkish because of their criticism towards Nord Stream 2, breaching of human rights in Russia. It was the same story for China. So the Greens were perceived as the hawkish party towards Russia and China. They put forward the dangers of Nord Stream 2 for Central Europe and for Eastern Europe. They put forward the dangers coming from the economic dependencies with China. And in both cases, Chinese and Russia, they also talked a lot about the breaching human rights in both of these countries. So from the very beginning, you could see that there would be some tensions between the Chancellery and the Foreign Office. After the Russian attack in Ukraine, they might be mitigated because, admittedly, Chancellor, there was no discussion within the government who is responsible for this war, that Russia is the main danger for Germany, for the whole Europe, for NATO. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to practical decisions, you could see some tension and differences between the Chancellery and SPD in itself, and between MFA and the Greens. For example, one of the main accusations of the SPD towards the Foreign Office is that they are too little diplomatic when it comes to Russia, mm-hmm. that maybe instead of criticizing and antagonizing, they should use diplomatic tools more efficiently, mm-hmm. for example. That is said towards, in case of MFA's position towards Russia, as well as China. And actually, when you look at Baerbock's style, she is quite outspoken if you compare her with other German foreign ministries. The way she acts when she's confronted with older, maybe more experienced colleagues from countries such as Turkey, even when she went to Russia and met Lavrov, or she went to China. I think she stands up to the challenge, mm-hmm. and he doesn't shy away to say sometimes very uncomfortable things, but in a diplomatic way. Mm-hmm. There was, at least by now, there was no major scandal caused by what she said, right? But at the same time, because she tries to also establish her position within the government, there is a level of distrust between the Chancellery and the MFA, and it is visible. There is Wolfgang Schmidt, you can call him manager of the Chancellery, he was called by as the shadow German foreign minister, mm-hmm. because when it comes to very important decisions, it is him and the other confidants of Scholz who deals with the most important questions in foreign policy, in the security policy, for example.
So we do know that the Chancellery and I hope I'm correct in saying the Chancellery and the Foreign Office are now much more in line as regards Russia.
Yeah. In the general terms, in general direction, in naming Russia as the main danger for European security, absolutely. When it comes to support for Ukraine, also there are no doubts about that, mm-hmm. right? Yeah, but when it comes to particularities, some small issues, mm-hmm. you can clearly point the differences between those two institutions.
But it's certainly the fact that the Foreign Office was one or two steps ahead of the Chancellery. It did a lot to elevate Baerbock's profile. She is a very well-known politician in Germany and outside Germany now. The question is, what happens next? Will she continue to rise, or?
Well, a lot depends on what will happen next. I mean, in the world politics, what will happen with the war in Ukraine, how the relations with China would develop, what would be the result of the presidential elections in the U.S. in the next year. But in general, she accepted that her competences are limited, and in this carved out field of her competence, she tried to establish herself not only as a strong politician, but as a politician truthful to her values. And by her values, I mean, for example, promotion of feminist foreign policy. There are a lot of criticism because MFA published a strategy, feminist foreign policy, and there are a lot of controversies, criticism towards it. But
Could I ask what a feminist foreign policy looks like?
so she promotes the equality of rights of women, minorities, creating chances for underrepresented groups in society, and it's definitely not only addressed towards women, but also for all those groups which I mentioned before. She also invested a lot she was also very much invested into security strategy and into China strategy. And actually that was also those two cases when you could see tensions between Chancellery and Foreign Office. So for example, there was an idea of creating a special group of experts, the Security Council, but there was a big quarrel between Chancellery and MFA. Where should this new body should be put? Should be put within the MFA or within the Chancellery? In the end, this body wasn't created because those two institutions couldn't agree who would be responsible for its functioning, and actually who would be members of the new society. Sometimes I have an impression that maybe Baerbock and Scholz might be playing this game of bad cop and the good cop. Because clearly she represents this most hawkish part of German government, and this is clear. This is right now. It is visible when we observe German policy towards China. She's more outspoken. She and Habeck, who is the Minister of Economy and is responsible for all those regulation considering investments in Germany, taking over German companies, etc. Also functioning of German companies abroad. They are more prone to take these hawkish decisions, whereas Chancellery is more diplomatic, more pro-dialogue part. You could clearly see it when it comes to Scholz's meeting with high-profile Chinese decision makers. Only this year we had German-Chinese government consultations, and it is clear that when it comes to final decision, as I mentioned, it's Chancellery who decides what's the final word, what's the final shape of the policy in each direction is. And given that Scholz is more pro-dialogue, Germany wouldn't want the confrontation with China. It doesn't mean that Baerbock or Habeck would like this confrontation to happen, although they are more, at least rhetorically, ready to do that.
You said many factors will come into play for the future of Annalena Baerbock's career, but should we imagine Chancellor Baerbock?
Maybe. Why not? As I said, you said many factors. I talked quite a lot about global politics, but a lot of depends on what happens on the German political scene. Right now, like I would imagine that her main competitor for the position of Kanzlerkandidat would be Robert Habeck.
Mm-hmm.
And given a lot of challenges that Habeck has to face, both when it comes to German energy policy, economy, climate, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
that may create for Baerbock some chances
Mm-hmm.
for gaining popularity and to.
Habeck's popularity is not particularly high at the moment.
It used to be. Right now, I think it's diminishing. And that would create an opportunity for Baerbock to have another go, to learn from her mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
and do things differently than in the first time when she ran for Chancellery.
So, thank you very much, Lydia.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you for watching this OSW interview. If you enjoyed it, please like the content and subscribe to our channel to keep up to date with all future videos.